Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Federico Toledo, and I have the honor and the pleasure to have Lisa Crispin here with us. Hello, Lisa. How are
Hello,
you today?
it's definitely my pleasure to be here. I'm just so excited to do something together with Abstracta. It's really great.
It's an honor, really, for me. Well, my name is Federico Toledo. I'm one of the co-founders and the COO at Abstracta, which is a company that offers software testing services. I will let Lisa introduce herself and go with your slides. And at the end of the presentation, we will have some space for questions and answers that you mentioned. That is your favorite part, right? And if you have any comments or questions, please, there is a chat where you can write them down and I will read them for you at the end. So go ahead, Lisa, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you do have questions as I go, if you have a clarifying question you need help with, go ahead and ask that, and Federico will interrupt me. That's totally fine. So this talk comes from a crazy idea I did that George Dinwiddie and I had a couple months ago. We wrote an article about it, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And thought it would be interesting to explore more. So a little about me. I'm currently just started a new job with OutSystems, and I'm a quality owner, which is kind of a funny title, but more like a quality coach. And I'm helping to build an observability practice. But over the past 20 years, I've been a hands-on tester on agile teams. And together with Janet Gregory, we've written 3 books, on an online video course, and a live training course, Agile Testing for the Whole Team, which is also now available remotely. So we're really excited to be able to offer that. And we have the Agile Testing Fellowship. And I live and work from my home in Vermont, a farm where I have 3 donkeys. So we do a lot of work on the farm together, and I drive them around with donkey carts and stuff. It's a lot of fun. So what I want to talk about today is behavior-driven development can help you shorten feedback loops and help you succeed with continuous delivery, which is of course all about shortening feedback loops also, and how in turn continuous delivery affects behavior-driven development, how it can enhance it. And I want to give you some ideas for your team to try. How can you be confident to do frequent changes, deploy those changes to production, get those out in front of customers? How can you feel confident about that when you're deploying weekly or daily or even multiple times per day? And again, this idea of thinking about behavior-driven development and continuous delivery in the same context is a new one to me. And so it's a little crazy, and I don't know if I'm going to explain it as well as I'd like to, but that's why the Q&A will be the best part. So for those of you who may not be familiar with behavior-driven development, it's just a tried and true way. It's been around since the early OOs, and it's designed to build shared understanding of features and stories among team members from different disciplines. And it's also a way to combine the insights from different viewpoints. So developers, product people, designers, testers, analysts, operations people, to get a more rounded view of what to build. It's very similar. You may be familiar with acceptance test-driven development or specification by example. These are all very similar ways to build that shared understanding. So let's look at some ways that it fits into and enables continuous delivery. So continuous delivery or continuous deployment, they're very similar. The idea behind them is to deploy small changes to production frequently at a sustainable pace. So without stress, we're just putting these little tiny changes in production. They're very small. If anything goes wrong, we know exactly what we just changed. We can always revert it or fix it quickly. But we get faster feedback because there's not much time that goes by between when we commit a change and get the information on what's happening in production. Continuous deployment differs from continuous delivery in that with continuous deployment, each new commit that passes through the build pipeline, passes all the automated tests, is automatically deployed to production. Whereas with continuous delivery, some human being makes a decision whether or not to deploy that particular build. So this is a simple example of a continuous delivery pipeline. And all this is, this fancy term of deployment pipeline, it's just all the stages, the path that your changes to your code or your configuration have to go through to get out to your production environment. And so even if you had nothing automated, you would still have steps that you have to take to get a change out to production. So there's no real mystery there. We know there are things we have to do. And in this example, we got some things that are automated, like static code analysis, running tests through the unit level, the API level, deploying to environments. And we have some manual steps, some human-centric things like exploratory testing, accessibility testing. Maybe we do some of the environment deploys manually. And this is kind of a revelation to me a couple of years ago when Abby Bangser and Ashley Hunsberger introduced me to this concept of visualizing your deployment pipelines, that the manual steps are part of it. We have to think about those things too. And even if it, like I say, even if it was all manual, you still have a pipeline. And I just showed you a bunch of linear steps, but it isn't really linear. So you may be familiar with that DevOps loop. I have a picture of it on a later slide, but it's really just a series of feedback loops. So we're getting something out to production, we're learning how people use it, we're seeing if there are errors, and we're taking that information and feeding it back to our designers and product people and people who are looking to see what's the most important change to make next, and then let's plan and code that change. So it's a continuous cycle. So how does behavior-driven development help with that? One of the important aspects of behavior-driven development is having the 3 Amigos meetings. Janet and I call this Power of 3 in our books. George Dinwiddie came up with a much better name, and a lot of the content of this talk is from George. So the idea is you get a product person, a programmer, and a tester. And I find these days we often need a couple more Amigos. A designer perhaps, an operations specialist, a database specialist. Not too many people, more than 6 or 7 people, it's too hard to do the meeting. And then we have structured conversations. So we have these meetings before our iteration planning meeting or our sprint planning meeting. And we use some kind of framework like example mapping or structured conversations from Ellen Gottesdiener, or more old school but still effective techniques like flow diagrams, context diagrams, state diagrams. We get together and guide our conversations to talk about each story that we're wanting to plan for the next iteration. We talk about the goal of that story, what's the value to the customer, and we elicit the business rules from our product people and ask them to give us concrete examples to illustrate those rules. How exactly should this piece of functionality or capability behave? Also talking about the non-functional quality attributes of it, things like usability or stability or security, accessibility. So we're building a groundwork for shared understanding. So we often may notice some differences as we're having a conversation. So perhaps we're working on a timesheet application for a delivery company, and drivers are going to record the time they spend driving. So some of the questions might be, well, are they going to be reporting the time in hours or minutes or both? What about overtime? What are they going to use? What are they going to use their phones to record the time? Is there an app? What are they going to be doing? Where will they be when they do this? And talk about the quality attributes like accessibility, operability. What do we need to log from our code so that if we have problems in production, we can diagnose those problems, have observability? So again, there are many frameworks and canvases that help you with these conversations. But the idea is that we have a better understanding of each story. We have our iteration or sprint planning, and then we can go on to building those stories. So this is just an example of mapping. That seems kind of redundant. we're talking about an app to schedule team meetings, and so we may have a story, schedule a team meeting, and different business rules around it, examples illustrating those rules. And as we talk, we're going to have questions. We want to get those questions answered, so we may want to make sure we retain those. And this information can be put into your online project planning software, or however you keep track of your stories. And we have these, so now we have these great examples. We can turn those into test scenarios. We know what behavior to expect. Sebros and Gaspar Nagy use the term business readable specifications. So you don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be able to read code to understand these examples. We know how each feature should behave, how each story within that feature, what should that do? What capability should that provide to the users? What's the value it should provide? And we can automate these scenarios. That helps us guide our development, because we know when the test passes, if all the tests pass, we're done with our coding for that story. And we can use those as automated regression tests to make sure that once customers start using these new capabilities, that they don't break later. And because these provide living documentation, anybody can look at these tests. We can effectively share understanding across the whole company. Everybody in different roles, different disciplines, different departments can understand them. Behavior-driven development also helps us slice our features into small, consistently sized stories. So on my teams, we've found it most effective if a story is something that we can finish doing, including all the testing and test automation, in a day or two. So these are really tiny increments of capability. And that really helps with continuous delivery, because we want small changes, low risk changes that we can get out. And then we also are basically doing exploratory testing about how people will use this capability even before we've written any code. And that means that we're more likely to build the right thing and deliver the right thing to our product owner or business stakeholders. That shortens our cycle time, that reduces waste and rework. And so again, we're speeding up these feedback loops. So let's turn the other way and see, how does continuous delivery enhance behavior-driven development? I'm a big fan of this book by Jez Hummel and David Farley, Continuous Delivery. And if you look at their website, continuousdelivery.com, you'll see the principles of continuous delivery. And I really feel like these principles are also at the heart of behavior-driven development. It's all about building quality in from the start, preventing bugs, working in small increments, automating the things that computers are good at doing, repetitive tasks, to free us up to do the problem solving, to do the more important human-centric activities like exploratory testing, and just trying to always improve. It's what agile development is all about, continuous improvement. And that whole team approach, everybody on the team owns quality. Everyone's responsible for making sure testing activities get completed, really focusing on building quality in. We want to know if the changes we're delivering are valuable to the customers. Are they using them? What problems are they having? And a lot of times we're not going to understand that till we get it out in production. So having the ability to get a learning release, or a small, thin, end-to-end slice of some new capability, or some people call these minimum viable products, get that out in front of some people to get some direct feedback. So maybe we have some early adopter users or beta users. We can turn the feature on just for them with release feature toggles. We can do a canary release. There are a lot of techniques, dark launches. We can get that feedback without causing pain to a bunch of people in case anything goes wrong. And we may discover it's not usable at all. My last team, we worked really hard on a new feature that we were so excited about, and we thought it was so useful, and we got into production and almost nobody used it. We could tell people got to that page in the user interface and didn't know what to do and navigated right off of it. So we knew we had to do a major user experience redesign on that. So getting that fast feedback is really, really good. And of course, once you do that, learning, release, or minimum viable product, you want to start adding to it if it's successful and fleshing it out. So continuous delivery gives us a mechanism to do this, and behavior-driven development gives us a mechanism to get the right things out there. So we're enabling that continuous DevOps loop. As we learn from production use, we may find we need to change our scenarios. We need to make different behavior. And again, we're going to end up with automated regression tests to make sure that behavior, once it's in place, doesn't break again. So it's this continuous flowing of learning, discovering, building new capabilities, getting them out to production, and learning some more. And we're lowering the risk because we're doing smaller changes a little bit at a time. Now, a lot of times we'll have to hide a lot of these changes until we have a critical mass and feel ready to turn on a feature. But that code's still in production. So at least we know it's not causing anything else in production to break. So it's really important. So whether the scenarios turn out to be not things our users did, they did something completely different, we discover that really fast and we can respond to it. So, excuse me, how can your team take advantage of all this? So some of you may be doing continuous delivery, but not doing behavior-driven development. And this has kind of been the story of my life in recent years, to end up on teams that are really rocking the continuous delivery, but not so much guiding testing with business-facing examples. And so what I've found is it's pretty easy to try a small experiment. If you don't already know about behavior-driven development or specification by example, whatever, I've got some resources in these slides. You can learn about a lot of great online resources. The cucumber.io website, for example, has a lot of tutorials and things about it. And it's a pretty easy thing to try, to have an Amigos meeting or a pre-planning meeting before your next sprint planning or iteration planning meeting. Just schedule half an hour. You might need more time, I suppose, if you have a really big team and do lots of stories, but hopefully you're working in small increments in an agile way, iteratively and incrementally. And go through each story that you're going to plan into your iteration, talk about the goal of that story, get specific business rules for how it should behave, and specific examples to illustrate each business rule. And again, questions will come up that can't all be answered. Keep track of those questions so you be sure to get them answered before you have to deliver the story. And then that's all you do during this time. And then after the meeting and after the iteration planning, get developers together with a tester, a designer, a product person, and start writing the scenarios based on the examples and turn those into executable tests to guide development. Now, it's the important thing to me, and the experience with my teams, is the important thing is the shared understanding. And we may turn those into automated regression tests and find that's not the most important thing. It's nice to have the regression tests. It certainly provides a nice safety net. But the most important thing is we all understood what to deliver, and we delivered that without a lot of rework, without a lot of having the story rejected and sent back to us. We knew what to do, and that's the most important thing. So that helps us, again, shorten that cycle time, shorten those feedback loops. And so try this out. I suspect you may find that one benefit of it is it helps you slice stories down small. One of the things I see teams struggle with the most, especially if they're new to the idea of agile development, is they don't know how to slice things down. Like, I can't make this any smaller, but you can when you start thinking about the business rules and the concrete examples. And if you can make your story smaller, then that way, if the story turns out to be twice as big as you thought it would be, and you thought it would take 2 days, but it really took 4, that's not a big deal. But if you work on a story that you think will take you a whole 2-week iteration and it takes twice as long, you're in big trouble. So try to get those stories smaller. And I think it'll also help you come up with really good automated regression test coverage, because you're working from examples of how the code will be used, and you'll be covering each feature in a really good way. And focusing on value, again, focusing on the value to customers is really important. Just the minimum value that they need. Don't add a bunch of bells and whistles if they don't need them. Move on to the next feature that they want, rather than fancying up the features they already have that they're already using. So what if you're doing behavior development, I can't talk. What if you're doing behavior-driven development or acceptance test-driven development or specification by example, but you're not doing continuous delivery yet? Maybe you don't even have any automated tests yet. Maybe you're not even, there are still teams not doing continuous integration yet. If that's the case for you, I would say stop everything else you're doing and get continuous integration in place. It's not hard to do, and it's really critical. And then you can start adding automated regression tests. But the important thing to me is visualize the path your changes take from being committed to your source code control or source code repository to getting deployed in production. What has to happen? Make a value stream map. See where there are bottlenecks. See where there are wait times, handoffs. So one team is waiting for another team to do something. Maybe we're all waiting on a test environment so we can do the testing. Maybe we don't have database changes that we need yet. So see where those bottlenecks are. It's a really good way to know how to improve that path to production. And again, sure, that's all part of your cycle time. You can shorten that. Have the conversations. So getting together with a virtual whiteboard or a virtual sticky note board or whatever you can use to visualize it, so we're all working remotely, that'll help you have a conversation and start having ideas for improving. What can you automate that's not automated now? And apply those continuous delivery principles, a whole team approach. We're all responsible. This is a problem for the whole team to solve. So whatever we identify as our biggest problem, we have people from all these different disciplines and backgrounds and experience levels to help us solve that problem. And these things aren't hard to do once you get everybody involved. So try visualizing and see how you can continually improve. Just one baby step at a time. Don't try to boil the ocean, as my friend Ashley Hunsberger says. Just try to do one step at a time. And be sure to build the manual and human-centric testing into that pipeline. For example, you want exploratory testing to explore those unknown unknowns. So when we have those 3 Amigos discussions, we're just talking about the things that we can think of, but we know there are going to be things we didn't think of, the unknown unknowns. And we need time to explore and try to uncover those before we get into production. And also, like I said, mentioned earlier, the operability, the testability of your code, and the ability to instrument your code, get good logging data. So if you still didn't catch things in your exploratory testing and things go wrong in production, you can quickly diagnose what happened and fix it or revert it. So I'm big on using visuals. Build relationships. Katrina Clokey has a wonderful book called A Practical Guide to Testing in DevOps. It's available on LeanPub, and she spends the first part of the book talking about building relationships, building bridges. So especially people on a team that's recently transitioned to Agile or is in a DevOps transformation, you may be now working on cross-functional teams with people you didn't work with before. Maybe you're a tester, you never worked directly with developers, or you never worked directly with designers before. Build relationships with people, get to know them. It's a little harder to do in our remote world, but hey, I just started a new job, and I find that because of the situation in the world, I even get to meet their kids because their kids wander into the room while I'm talking to them on Zoom. These little, these human interactions really help us build trust and build relationships. Get to know people outside of your team as well. If you still have a separate operations team, those people are your friends. See what you can do to get to know them. Asking for help is a great way to build a relationship. Once somebody has done something for you, done a favor for you, they think they must be your friend or they wouldn't have done that favor for you. Offer to help them. All these things build trust, and we know we have a lot to learn, especially if we want to do things like behavior-driven development and continuous delivery, and we're new to those things. So building a trusting environment is really, really important for that. And building a quality culture is kind of all about that, right? It's what DevOps is about. It's what Agile is about. The whole team owning quality and really committing to some level of quality to build into their product. And no matter what obstacles get in their way, they're going to think of a way to overcome that. So we know from scientific studies, things done at Google, that psychological safety is a prerequisite to having a high-performing team. And the State of DevOps survey has shown that that's an important factor. And we also have things like Joshua Karievsky's Modern Agile. If you go to modernagile.org, you'll see the Modern Agile principles, and one of them is psychological safety is a prerequisite. And I know sometimes people think, oh, that's kind of unicorn land, because a lot of us have worked in really unhealthy cultures where it wasn't safe to fail. You really didn't want to point out problems or stick your neck out because you might get in trouble, or try something new because if it failed, you would get in trouble, which stifles innovation. We need leaders who have a vision and who know how to serve and support people and make them feel safe to try new things, but try them on a small scale, one baby step at a time. Try small experiments and let them do their best work. Again, that's what Agile was supposed to be all about. And personally, I was really lucky to be on Agile teams like that. When you focus on speed, so a lot of teams think, oh, we're Agile now, that means we go fast, right? Especially, unfortunately, a lot of business managers think that. Not really how it works. We really have to focus on quality, and we have a lot to learn, so we need time to learn. So we can't just be cranking features out. We need to take time to build that foundation of things like core practices of continuous integration, like I just talked about. Test-driven development. Test-driven development has, again, with scientific studies, been shown to prevent 80% of bugs. Teams that do test-driven development have 80% fewer bugs than other teams. Why doesn't everybody do it? Because it's really hard to learn. It takes a lot of time. We have to make that investment in quality. It's going to let us go faster later on because we have really great code design. We have a really testable code base. We have good operability. We can respond to problems in production quickly. All those things are based on having that quality foundation. You'll have to learn the business domain because we have to help our business stakeholders. They tend to want the sun, the moon, and the stars. And you can talk to them about what's the purpose of this new feature that you want. And if you understand the business domain, you can whittle that down and say, we can do 80% of what you want at half the cost. That extra 20% is going to cost you 50% more. We've had these conversations on my teams with our product owner. And they're always going to say, oh yeah, the 80% is fine. That makes you look fast because you just saved half the work. You're not actually going any faster, but you are, because you're not wasting time on things that nobody really needs. Your customers didn't need those things. So these are all things that go into it. A focus on quality is what brings you speed in the long run. But if you focus on speed, you cut corners. It's like, oh, I'll automate those tests later. I'll refactor that code later. Let's just get this quick hack in now. That really becomes technical guilt if you never go back and do the refactoring or add those automated tests back. And that really drags your team down. Now you've got code everybody's afraid to change. You can't do frequent changes to production anymore without stress because you're really not sure if any small change will break something. So focus on quality. So these are conversations to have with your whole team. Try to get your whole team together on Zoom or whatever video conferencing that you have, and talk about how can you build shared understanding even before you start building new features, new stories. How can you shorten cycle time? How can you deploy smaller changes out to production more frequently to reduce risk? And keep your customers happy, because you're always giving them little new gems of value, little nuggets of value all the time, and responding to their needs really fast. That's what makes customers really happy. Again, I have these resources, and I'll make my slides. I'll give my slides for abstracted and make those available. And I've got some great resources here. Of course, there are lots and lots more, but I think should get you started. So I think at this point, I can stop sharing my screen and we can have questions.
Excellent.
Did that work? Yay.
Yeah, excellent, Lisa. Thank you so much for the presentation. And we have some questions. Before going to, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Oh, cool, yes.
Well, before going to the questions and answers, I want to invite everyone to the next webinar we have. I will be talking in this opportunity next Tuesday about something that I find kind of related to the topic, which is more focused on different strategies for reducing costs in software testing. I'm not trying to promote the idea of reducing costs in software testing, but what I want to do is to share specific things. If you, in this situation, have to reduce costs in the whole process, in the whole company, maybe when you are going to focus in software testing, I have some ideas to share, mainly also trying not to compromise the quality, okay? But we will share the recording of this webinar and also the link for signing up for this webinar in a follow-up email. And let's start with some questions. So first of all, I wanted to mention that I really like the title of the presentation, because it's something that there are two concepts that are mainly related to development, not specifically for testing. It's like the same happened to me with the continuous delivery book, because it's like, for me, it's a book about testing, right? But
it's absolutely about testing. When Dave and Jez wrote that book, they asked, I think Addison Wesley published that book, and they asked them to have me as a technical reviewer of the book, and I was like, I didn't even know what that term meant, because it wasn't a term we used back then. It's like, I don't think I can help with that. And they're like, oh no, they really want you to read it. Like, okay. And I started reading. It's like, oh, it's about testing. And I also realized that it was something my team was doing, continuous delivery. We just didn't have that word for it. But I was thrilled with the book because it was all about testing. And yeah, people worry because the word DevOps doesn't have the word test in it, but testing is part of development and it's part of operations. It's the heart of everything.
Yeah, and I think it's something that happens many times is that when you say that you're going to talk about testing, maybe you don't get many developers involved in the conversation. And as you say, it's like the three amigos, this idea of the three amigos, this is, or more amigos invited also to the conversation, but it's something that should happen in different moments of the development process, right? It's like we should be sharing ideas or sharing knowledge or perspectives all the time. But sometimes with the name, or if we name or title our presentations with something very specific for testing, we don't get them very interested. I hope this changes in the future, man.
Yeah, it's, the testing is just a means to the end. What we want is quality. What we want is happy customers. So testing, I think Rob Meany has said this to me before, testing isn't the goal, right? The testing is the way we get to our goal. So yeah, I think you're right. It can throw people off. So I just want to say to people out there, feel free to ask me questions about any topic, including donkeys. So.
I have here one question that I really find interesting. It's from Daniel Jr. and I will read it. How can you distribute the test in the test pyramid?
How can you distribute?
Yeah, teams practicing BDD,
Oh, okay.
they define scenarios in the given, when, then.
Mm.
They assume all tests will be at the same level and perhaps UI-based tests. But
Mm-hmm.
most tests can be lower in the test pyramid. Therefore, for tests at lower levels, we won't have the reports on living documentation. Any advice about that?
No, that's a really great question. Yeah, I definitely like using models like the test automation pyramid and to remind us that pushing the tests as low level as we can. I mean, a lot of the lower level tests, like the unit tests, those are more of a code design activity. But the higher level tests will still help the developers understand what they need to code, and it'll help them think of the unit test to rate. But yeah, the given when then, you know, that's a useful framework in terms of being able to go and automate the test and to make sure we include everything we need. But we don't talk that way, right? Nobody says, given this situation, when I do this. I mean, it's artificial. It's a little artificial. So I could see the issue with that, but I think it's the conversations that are important. So having a developer involved, when my team's done example mapping, and we just have that small group, we put that information, we put the business rules and examples and the purpose of the story into the story in our online project tracking tool. Then when we have the iteration planning meeting, everybody can see all that information, and right away everybody has kind of the same big picture of what we would have to do to deliver this story. And so I think it just gets people thinking about what tests, and that certainly you should also have the conversations in your iteration planning. How will we test the story? What testing can we do through the unit level or through the API level? And I've definitely had those conversations. A lot of times the developers say, we can take care of all of this testing at the unit level. You don't need to worry about having tests at the API or UI level for them. Of course, you have to have some trust built up with your developers for that. But and conversely, a lot of times I'll say, we can't test drive this at the unit level. We'd like to test drive it at the API level. Or even I've done acceptance or behavior-driven development through the UI level because there was no layer between the UI and the unit level that we could get to write tests. And we didn't think it would work, but it did. So just experiment and see what works for you. I think you have to try different things, but definitely have those conversations about what can we push to lower levels.
So it's like this strategy is mainly related to the initial conversation, and then there is another conversation about how to distribute the different tests in the different layers, or how to implement what you talked with the team, right? Something like this. I have another question, is related mainly with non-functional requirements. It could be requirements related to infrastructure or performance or accessibility. If you include also this type of requirements in the BDD approach, and any advice related to that?
Oh, that's a really good question too, because we certainly want to make sure that we touch on those. I'm not sure. I mean, in some cases, I think you can make executable, or you can make scenarios of, I don't know if off the top of my head I can mentally write a story, but given that a user needs to use a screen reader, then when the user gets to this page, this is what should happen. Making sure that we can accommodate the screen reader, for example, or some things, again, there's some things there that are going down to the unit level, like, we agree that we're going to use ARIA labels on all our UI elements, for example. Those are definitely great conversations to have, and they should be part of the Three Amigos discussions for sure. I think you can example map them. I think you can give examples. Whether you can turn them into actual BDD type tests, I don't know. I have to say I haven't really tried to do that, but definitely having the conversations and getting the examples is really important.
For me, something that is really important is to have the different perspectives, like because it's not the same. Talking about performance, which is the area maybe where I have more experience working on different projects, but maybe if you talk with the product owner, you have like a perspective from the risks for the business related to what is going to happen when many users are going to connect to the same endpoint, okay? And then there is another perspective, which is, okay, as I know how this is implemented, I know that we could have a potential problem in this particular method or whatever. So combining or having all the perspectives, I think it's great for defining the strategy to mitigate those risks, right? So I agree that we should have also those conversations.
And consider other, I mean, I use example mapping, but there are lots of other frameworks you can use. I really like Ellen Gottesdiener and Mary Gorman's 7 dimensions of quality, or 7 product dimensions, from their book Discover to Deliver, because they cover all kinds of different aspects of quality and things like what environment is that feature going to be used in, what kind of device, or where will people be, accessibility concerns. It covers a lot more ground, so that may be more appropriate for you to use. So look at all the different ways to guide those conversations and try different things.
I have an experience to share, mainly related to, as we are talking about non-functional requirements, but it's more related to the continuous delivery. You mentioned that it helps to lower the risks because you you deliver to your customers like in smaller pieces, right? So the risk is related to what changed between one version and the other. I remember a couple of years ago, I was working for a company here in Silicon Valley. They had this e-commerce site. And when you have a set of tools and ideas or methodologies, you want to apply those ideas to different projects. No? So when I just started to work with them, I said, hey, we should be doing performance testing. Why are we not doing any performance tests here? And what they say is, we deploy every day. So and we are monitoring in production. If something starts to consume more memory or more CPU or something like this, we are going to get a notification, an alert, and we will know easily which lines of code changed between one version and the other that originated this problem. So this is how I learned about lowering the risk, how continuous delivery can help in this.
That's that's a really great point, and it came up recently on my new team. It's like we're talking about performance testing, and my manager's like, don't do performance testing. We need to monitor in production is what we need to do. Our systems are complex. We need to be able to take different approaches.
Yeah, totally. There are so many questions.
Oh, wow. I can't see them, so I wasn't sure.
Let me find another one here. How could you promote the value of exploratory testing in a continuous delivery environment? From Ali here.
So that's another thing that my quality team and I are trying to do. How do we socialize as engineers and make them understand how valuable it is? I've had a lot of different techniques. One of the things that is that I think might be a key, and it doesn't happen very often, is the development managers have to understand the value of exploratory testing. The developers, what I've seen to be successful is when the developers, as part of their skills matrix to kind of go up the ranks and advance their career, included different levels of competency at exploratory testing. They were much more motivated to learn it. But also, I think they understand with today's complex systems, you're not going to get everything, even if you're doing behavior-driven development, you're not going to think of everything up front. You need to explore and learn. So I find pairing with developers is a good way to teach them, or even just doing workshops to, a 30 or hour-long workshop to give them a feel for. I like to use Elizabeth Hendrickson's approach with the exploratory testing charters and using personas. So just give them a feel. I've done workshops where I have them test toys and games, so they can adopt a persona like, a 4-year-old girl who wants to break something. And what would she do to test? And that gives them an idea of, oh, here's what we're trying to do, make it fun. And then they can start applying that to real software. So pairing with them, if you can get people to work in a mob, so where we're doing strong style pairing, driver and navigator, and rotating those roles so that everybody gets a chance to see it. I've had good luck doing that with acceptance testing sessions. So when your product owner is ready to accept some stories, get the tester, developer, designer, product owner, get everybody in the room, customer support. I find it really useful to have customer support in the room, and do a mob acceptance testing where one person drives and then somebody's the navigator, and everybody in the room can have input. And I find that we can quickly test 4 or 5 stories within 30 minutes because everybody's in the room that we need to answer the questions. If we're confused about the design or the functionality or the error handling, everybody's in there. We don't have to go ask anybody else a question. So that's a good way to introduce it and see the value. A lot of teams do bug bashes, or kind of getting together in a group and testing something right before you release it or before you put it into beta. I found that introducing the concept of let's write some exploratory testing charters for our bug bash so that we're not duplicating effort, and we can maybe pair up on those. And I've actually found developers quite willing to try that once, and then once they try it once, they say, oh, that was pretty valuable, let's keep doing that.
Nice. More questions. Where does BDD fit in the development pipeline with TDD?
Oh, that's another great question. So test-driven development, TDD, is, like I said when I was doing the talk, it's more of a code design activity. So we'll write a test for some little tiny piece of functionality, and then that test fails, and we write the code to make the test pass. And so that's a really good way to get testable code, well-designed code, really robust code. It just has so many advantages, and we get a safety net of unit-level regression tests out of it. You can actually do test-driven development in a behavior-driven type format. So, I've worked on teams using Ruby that used RSpec for their test-driven development at the unit level as well as at the higher API and UI level. So you can, when BDD first came out, people were doing it at the unit level as well. And I'm sure people still do. But behavior-driven development that most teams do, test-driven development is the technology-facing tests that help guide development. The business people don't care about it. They care about the outcome. It's the developers owning that internal quality, their code correctness. Behavior-driven development is about business-facing tests to guide development. So what's important to the business? How do they want this feature to behave? They own that quality. They have to try to explain it to us so we can provide it. So that's where the dividing line is.
After reading your book, one of your books, and some blog posts, I designed an activity based on the quadrants of the agile testing quadrants. I think I emailed you with the idea I had by that time, and I found very useful the quadrants and the vision, discussing those division between the product vision and the technology vision to analyze and to share this separation, right? This is what you just mentioned. And also to share the understanding of this, which is very important. And more questions. Maybe I think we have time for a couple more.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, okay. I got time.
Cool. If you had, you mentioned that what to do, the steps to follow when you already have BDD and you want to adopt CD, and the other way when you have CD and you want to adopt BDD. If you don't have any of those in place, which one would be the first?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think you might have to take an approach of doing one and then the other a step at a time. For sure, you need continuous integration. So BDD is not going to help you if you don't have continuous integration. And I think it's important to visualize your pipeline and know what it is, and even if it's not automated yet, to understand the steps that has to go through. I think that's just important infrastructure. I think your team needs that kind of support structure around it. And then you can start trying to do the BDD, because you want to get value to customers. It's how your company stays alive. So I think the BDD is really critical. Whether or not you can release every day may or may not be important to your customers, but whether you deliver the things that they want is important. But the BDD, I think, will help you slice things down smaller. So that'll help enable you to work towards continuous delivery faster. So I think both of those things would enhance your path to being able to deliver small changes that are valuable more frequently. So, and it depends on your business domain. Some business domains, customers don't want a new change every day. It's like once a quarter is fine. Once a year, airline safety, airplane maintenance, for example. I've known people worked in that domain. Every 2 years is totally fine for them. But that doesn't mean your company can't have a deployable, production-ready release candidate every day, and that should be your goal. You should have a stable build, because that's going to enable you to test it better on a daily basis in your test environments.
Totally. Well, Lisa, I think we can wrap up here. I want to thank you again for your time and sharing the valuable knowledge and experience that you have shared here.
Yeah, and send me the questions. I'm happy to answer them.
There are so many, but we will share it.
I type fast.
Also,
it's okay.
Cool. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will share the invitation to our following webinars, and also the recording of this one.
Yeah, it's so exciting to have this whole series of webinars. I love it.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, and please stay safe. Be healthy.
Yes, stay in touch. Feel free to ping me on Twitter, email, whatever.
The same. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.